Marley was dead. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge and he were partners for many years, and Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, was Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. The door opened to let two people in. They were portly gentlemen with books and papers in their hands.
Scrooge and Marley, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner. At this festive season, Mr. Scrooge, it is desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
They are. I wish I could say they were not.
What shall I put you down for, Mr. Scrooge?
Nothing.
You wish to remain anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make other people merry. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentlemen withdrew. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and Scrooge could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The owner of one scant young nose stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol.
God bless you, merry gentleman, may nothing you dismay.
God bless you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. For Jesus Christ our Savior was born on this day, to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray.
Shutting up the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose?
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It's only once a year, sir.
That's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Well, be here all the earlier next morning.
Scrooge walked out with a growl. He took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern and went home to bed. He put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and he sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed. He was obliged to sit close to it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. The bells ceased as they had begun, together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. Then he heard the noise much louder, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. It passed into the room before his eyes. A dying flame leaped up as though it cried, "I know him, Marley's ghost," and then fell again.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. You don't believe in me?
I don't.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world.
You are fettered. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link.
7 years dead and traveling all the time?
The whole time. No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode?
The spectre floated out upon the bleak, dark night, and Scrooge, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that looking out of bed he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. The hour bell sounded with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room and the curtains of his bed were drawn. Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them.
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past.
What brings you here?
Your welfare, your reclamation. Take heed, rise, and walk with me.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road. The city had entirely vanished. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs and carts. They shouted to each other until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. They left the high road and soon approached a mansion. They went across the hall and into a long, bare, melancholy room. A lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down and wept to see his poor, forgotten self as he had used to be.
Poor boy, poor boy. I wish I... Yeah, but it's too late now. Too late.
What is the matter?
Oh, nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all. It's too late now, too late.
In the brook midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen
let us see another Christmas. Do you know this place?
Know it? Was I apprenticed here? Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again.
Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up and clear away.
Clear away? It was done in a minute. The floor was swept, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night.
I wish you a Merry Christmas. I wish you a Merry Christmas.
In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid, in came the cook. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couples at once, down the middle and up again. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. Advance and retire, hold hands with your partner, bow and curtsy. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig shook hands with every person as he or she went out and wished him or her a Merry Christmas.
What is the matter?
Oh, nothing particular.
Something, I think.
No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. Leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me.
Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
They stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, invisible as they had been before. And then the good spirit led Scrooge to his clerks, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit and laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit.
Whatever has got your precious father, then, and your brother Tiny Tim, and Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour.
Here's Martha, Mother! Hurrah! There's such a goose, Mother. There's Father coming and Tiny Tim.
And how did Tiny Tim behave?
As good as gold, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me, coming home, that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Jesus good hath done.
Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot, Master Peter mashed the potatoes, Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce, Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him, and the two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody. At last, the dishes were set out, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all round the board. And even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and feebly cried, "Hurrah, hurrah!" There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone to take the pudding up and bring it in.
Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it whilst we were merry with the goose. Hello? A great deal of steam.
The pudding was out of the copper.
A smell like a washing day.
Ah, that was the cloth.
A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook's next door to each other, with a laundress's next door to that.
That was the pudding. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quartern of ignited brandy, and bedight with Christmas holly stuck into the top. At last, the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect, Bob served it out with beaming looks.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us. God bless us, everyone.
Tiny Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered hand in his, as if he loved the child, and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, kind spirit, say he will be spared.
Mr. Scrooge, I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it.
My dear, the children. Christmas Day.
It should be Christmas Day, I am sure, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
Christmas night, on Christmas Eve, to hear the news the angels bring. On Christmas night, on Christmas Eve, to hear the news the angels bring. News of rich joy, news of rich life, news of a merciful King's birth. And why should men on earth be so sad, since our Redeemer made us glad? And why should men on earth be so sad, since our Redeemer made us glad? When from our sin he set us free, oh, for to gain our liberty. All out of darkness and of light, which made the angels sing this night. All out of darkness and of light, which made the angels sing this night. Glory to
The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? Oh, ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and to do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. Lead on, Spirit. Answer me one question. You have shown me much. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of the things that may be only? Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show me. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons they teach. Holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrank, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man.
A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year to all the world. Oh, hello there, hello, hello there, hello.
He was checked in his transports by the churches, ringing out the lustiest peals he'd ever heard. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. He called to a boy in Sunday clothes.
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there?
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Is it really? Go and buy it.
Walker.
No, I'm in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. There never was such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be. Hello, hello, a Merry Christmas, a Merry Christmas, one and all, a Merry Christmas, one and all.
Ding dong, merrily on high, ring the bells are ringing. Ding dong, merrily in the sky is ringed with angels singing. Hosanna in excelsis. Hosanna in excelsis. Prelude to the divine, your matin chimely ring us. May you beautifully line your evening song be sing us.
Scrooge was better than his word. He raised Bob Cratchit's salary, and to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.